Welcome back to the Calculated Risk Podcast. I am Tyler Shoemaker, joined as always by Kelly Ford. Another week has come and gone. Week 11 did not disappoint. Some teams kind of got pushed to the brink. Thought we might see some chaos. It didn't quite work out that way, but Florida State got pushed a little bit by Miami. Oregon got pushed by USC. They only won by single digits. And we had some games that Washington and Utah. Washington only won that game by a touchdown. Credit to their defense for stiffening up in the second half and not allowing any second half points there in that game against Utah. But some of these teams that we look at as contenders, and rightfully so, didn't have easy weeks. And then you had Michigan in a battle. They pretty much controlled the game against Penn State. Ohio State dominated Michigan State, in what was basically a one-half game. Georgia, Kelly and I were just talking before we recorded. Georgia's, looks like they might be hitting that gear, so we'll see if they can maintain that as they go to Tennessee this week. But Kelly, what were your initial takeaways from week 11?
Similar to yours, Tyler, survive and advance. It's a basketball term that we use in March Madness every year, but that's kind of what it felt like as I went to bed Saturday night. You talked about a lot of these contenders, a lot of these teams ranked near the top of the committee's rankings. They were tested, they were pushed. They were games in the fourth quarter against unranked teams, against teams that they were heavily favored over. Some rivalry games in there too, so that adds an element to the mix. But for the most part, they got the job done. And for me, Tyler, the biggest takeaways, the two highest rated games in terms of my watchability scores, it was Michigan, Penn State, and it was Georgia, Ole Miss. So those are two top 10 matchups by the committee's rankings, two top 15 matchups by my power ratings. And, the two teams that were favored in those games, the two teams that are up there for the playoff committee, they got the job done and they looked really good doing it. And they're getting now bumps in my power ratings and resume rankings for what those two teams accomplished that I know we're going to get into. But to me, those were the main themes: survive and advance. And we were waiting to see Michigan and Georgia play a highly power rated opponent. They both passed the test, and they did it pretty convincingly.
Yeah, and from the Georgia standpoint too, not only did they look awesome, but they beat Missouri by 9 last week, and then Missouri put it on Tennessee. So Georgia kind of got it. We talk about just how the ratings work and who you played before, how they perform also matters. So Georgia kind of got it from both ways. So they jumped up quite a bit here for both of us. So with that, let's get into our updated power ratings after week 11. So Kelly, I haven't really got to look at yours, so we're going to do this live on the show. So we both still have Michigan number one. We have the same top three: Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon. But I have Oregon 2 and Ohio State 3. You have that flipped, but pretty close in terms of their rating. At least for Oregon, we almost have them rated identically. Ohio State, I'm just a little bit lower than you are, but we'll get into this Georgia thing because we were just talking about this before we recorded, and I said Georgia reminds me of 2019 LSU from like a power rating standpoint, because we know what they're capable of when they really flip the switch and turn it on. But the problem is staying true to consistency with our models. We don't want to manually manipulate the data, and their data just doesn't say that they should be rated as highly as I personally think they probably should be. So it's quite the conundrum here from a rating standpoint. Putting out projections, knowing that people are using my projections to bet. I know that Georgia probably should be higher, but the problem is, no matter which way you slice the numbers, all the metrics that I factor into my numbers, none of those say that Georgia should be a top 1, 2, or 3 team. So it makes it very tough when these type of teams come along that have this crazy high ceiling that just don't necessarily consistently perform that way. So that's kind of my big thinking point this week is like, what do you do with teams like that? Kelly, what are your thoughts here on Georgia, how they looked and how you view them, through the lens of the model?
Yeah, I agree with you, Tyler. You can't make the subjective manual adjustments to the model. I mean, that invalidates and undermines everything that we're trying to do with an objectivity of the model. So I also agree with you, though, that you can look at it and say, hey, you know what? If I'm betting this or if I'm looking at this like myself, like Tyler Shoemaker, as Kelly Ford outside of the models, yeah, this is a team that I would have higher, but the model is what it is. It's proven to be successful, and you're going to trust it as a starting point, and you can make your subjective adjustments as a viewer, as a fan, as someone who watches college football. But the model is the model, and that's what it comes out to. So I agree with you on all those fronts. The thing that, and I'm pretty comfortable with where I have Georgia. They're up to number 4 for me this week. It's the highest they've been in quite some time. Again, they started the year number 1 for me in the power rating and fell to as low as I want to say 10 or 11. So they're up to number 4. I feel decently good about where I have them. Penn State's a team that attracted some comments for me this week. People saying, can't take this seriously. It's invalidated. Penn State's number 5. And I didn't respond to any of those folks. I was proud of myself. I just hit mute and moved on. But the thing that I almost came back with was like, hey, yeah, I'll tell Bill Connolly that it doesn't check, that SP Plus doesn't check out, because I went and checked, and Bill has Penn State number 5 as well. So again, I didn't. I bit my tongue. I hit mute. I moved on with my day, and it was all good. But for me, what's standing out in terms of the top 10, Oklahoma. And I know the TSI has been huge on Oklahoma all year. Even, I had them number 2 for a while there in the power ratings. But not quite the same level of infatuation that TSI had, and you've got them back up to number 5. They're up to number 7 again for me. I mean, a really good performance this week, impressive performance this week, moves them back up ahead of Texas. Texas now down to number 10 for me. Washington continues to kind of not impress the model. And from a power rating standpoint, from a resume standpoint, Washington's all good, still in my top 4. We're going to get to that in a minute. But for Washington, from the power rating standpoint, I still have number 13. It's exactly where I had them last week. They've kind of been hanging out outside the top 10 for a few weeks now. So that's a team that I'm keeping an eye on. Louisville's another one, down at number 22. People are going to say, well, they still have a shot at the CFP. And I won't disagree, because they have 1 loss. They're in a Power 5 conference. And if they win out, they'll be a 1-loss Power 5 conference champion. Now, that still might not be good enough this year. In most years, that probably is good enough. This year, it might not be. We'll see. But that's a team that, from a power rating standpoint, the model's just not sold. And we talked about that in the summer and leading into the season too, about how Louisville's schedule set up really nicely for them to potentially make a run with a good record, but not quite be on that same level of elite standard from a power rating standpoint. So those are some of the things that jump out to me. Missouri fans, I know, still aren't happy. Their team's number 19 in the power ratings. They think they should be higher. Kansas State fans, very happy with me. They love seeing their team at number 11. I'm just rolling through my top 30 here and seeing kind of who's been drawing the comments today. TCU still at number 28. People wondering why TCU's in there. But yeah, that's where I am, Tyler. And as always, with the G5 comparison here, I'll just mention, for those not viewing on YouTube, I've got SMU number 23. That's my only G5 in the top 30 for me.
Yeah, and I've got, you mentioned Oklahoma. I do have them number 5. You got them number 7, but from a rating standpoint, we're almost. I mean, we're 0.2 of a point off where we have them rated. So I feel okay about that. I'm with you on Penn State. I've got them number 4, but they're actually rated lower than you've got them. My ratings are a little more like condensed, I think, than yours. It looks like, and my teams are generally lower and kind of closer together here, but um, yeah, I've got Kansas State number 9. We've been pretty in lockstep on Kansas State here over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I think. Alabama's another team that, like, because of how they looked early in the season compared to how they're playing recently, I know they probably should be power rated higher than 10th with an 18.2 rating. That's 5 points below where you've got them. So that, I think you're probably more accurate on Alabama than I am at this point. So that's another one. Alabama and Georgia both are just. I'm kind of like, I know, but the numbers are the numbers, so I'm gonna let it ride. But those are two that, like, again, you always say, like, when I separate the model from Tyler the person, I would have Georgia and Alabama both rated higher. You mentioned SMU. SMU is very interesting. I was just looking at some numbers before we recorded here, and in terms of unadjusted EPA on the defensive side of the ball, there's only, I believe it was 4 teams that had a negative EPA, which is good, and that's Ohio State. It was 5 teams: Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Iowa, and SMU are the 5 defenses in the country that have an unadjusted negative EPA on the defensive side. So That's just one thing I look at. That's not like make or break, but it is something I take into account. And I thought that was interesting because SMU is a team that, when you think about what they've done over the course of the year, they've killed everyone they should have killed, and they played right with Oklahoma, for all intents and purposes. So I feel pretty good about SMU. We're going to find out more about them this week. My background, if you're watching on YouTube, my background is Memphis, the Liberty Bowl. They're going to play SMU this week, and that's going to be a big one in the G5. I think Memphis is kind of trending down right now, though. I have to look closer at that game. I might be betting on SMU in that game. But you mentioned Washington. I think we're pretty much in alignment there. Mid teens. I'm probably going to be on Oregon State against them this week in Corvallis. I think it's a good spot for Oregon State. Washington has just they've just been playing with fire for the last month, and I think it's finally going to burn them this week. So we'll see. But yeah, overall, we got, a lot of the same teams here. TCU, you've been higher on TCU than I have. So it makes sense that Texas took a pretty decent sized drop, for this time of year in my ratings after the close call with TCU this week. Whereas it doesn't look like they really took much of a hit in yours, but that makes sense because you've had TCU higher than I have here recently. So, and then UCF, I don't have UCF in the top 30, but obviously I bet them. That was one of my best bets that I gave out in my decent article this week. UCF against Oklahoma State was just such a great spot for UCF. I've got them 34 after that performance. So, they're right there just outside the top 30.
Yeah, I should have mentioned UCF for me, the biggest riser this week. They're up 2.7 points in the ratings. No one moved more in the positive direction this week. And that just, again, highlights, Tyler, what we've talked about. The later in the season you get, the harder it is to move significant margins, a large number of points in either direction. Beginning of the year, we were talking about a team swinging, upwards of a touchdown after a given week. Now UCF, after just demolishing Oklahoma State in a game that I had closer to a pick 'em, so I was saying UCF and the points, but I certainly didn't see UCF doing what they were what they ended up doing. But they're up 13 spots and they're up 2.7 points. More importantly, so they jump up to number 29 for me. So yeah, the UCF's a team I should have mentioned as well. But great call in the VSiN article. Make sure you're checking out Tyler's work because he's if you're not, you're leaving money on the table.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was from a betting standpoint, it was a rough week for me. I think I went 7-9 this week, but that was after an 8-1 week last week, so I knew regression was probably coming. But best bets have been awesome though. My VSiN write ups, definitely. If you're gonna play anything, play my VSiN write ups. They've been really good all year. So that's definitely the best course of action from a betting standpoint. I end up betting higher volume and probably reaching on a couple of games. But I see Texas Tech there, number 30 for you. That was another one of my good calls. I had a lot of bad calls. I was on FIU plus 10.5, and they lost by like 100. So it's not all good, but it's fun, and the numbers steer us in the right direction more often than not. But Kelly, I think that'll wrap us up here from the power rating standpoint. Let's look at our resume most deserving rankings after week 11. So again, I have not seen Kelly's most deserving rankings. This is the first time I'm seeing them, so we're like revealing them here live on YouTube. Uh, same top four. Yeah, wow. Ohio State, Michigan, Florida State, Washington, top four for both of us. And then Alabama, Georgia, we both have 5 and 6. I have Georgia 5, Alabama 6. Kelly has Alabama 5, Georgia 6. So right there, Texas number 7 for us both. So really in lockstep here. I see James Madison number 12 in the KFord. They've been high for me. They're number 8 for me. Liberty number 9 and Oregon number 10 for me will round out my top 10. And then Kelly's got Oregon number 8, Ole Miss number 9, and Missouri number 10. So yeah, a lot of the same teams here. Obviously, when you're doing when wins and losses actually factor in, you would expect to have a lot of the same teams because there's only so much room you can move with the same record. But yeah, no, this has been fun. I will say, like I said, this is not my primary objective with my numbers, but it has been fun each week to update that and kind of see from like a CFP committee type standpoint how things should look, and then comparing those to what the actual committee does, which has been pretty close again, other than Georgia. But as we mentioned, Georgia, inching their way up there. They're number 5 for me. to be honest. I think they're probably going to be number one in the committee's rankings this week. I thought they might be last week, and I'm pretty sure they're going to go to number one this week. What I'm going to be most interested in, though, you and I both have Ohio State above Michigan. I'm going to be curious to see if the committee keeps Ohio State above Michigan now that Michigan has, a quality win against Penn State on the road. I know Ohio State beat Penn State also at home, but I'm curious how closely the committee viewed Ohio State and Michigan. And now that Michigan has, a win of note, I wonder if that's going to push them ahead of the Buckeyes or not.
I think the committee is going to put Georgia number one. I think they'll put Ohio State number two, keep them ahead of Michigan because they're going to say Ohio State has that quote ranked win at Notre Dame, which Michigan doesn't have. So I think that's going to be their rationale. And ultimately, they're going to say it doesn't matter. It'll play itself out on the field. They won't say that, but the other talking heads will say it'll play itself out on the field, which it will. We'll see that. But yes, Tyler, as you mentioned, I've got Ohio State number one still this week. Their lead on the field, though, has shrunk a little bit as others have improved their resumes around them. Michigan, just an absolute huge mover for me. Last week they were number 9. I kept saying they haven't done anything. They haven't played anybody. They had done quite a bit. They were number 1 in my relative scoring margin metric. They remain number 1. So they're doing a lot against their schedule, even relative to expected. Like they're overperforming. But when that's a smaller component for me than the overall like record achievement, like how difficult is your record and how difficult is it to achieve that record against the schedule you played, that was holding Michigan back. They get a win on the road at Penn State, who, again, I have power rated in the top 5. That's a really impressive point of the resume. And so Michigan vaults all the way up from number 9 to number 2. But if you look, and it's small on the screen, but when I post it on Twitter on Monday, you'll be able to see it. And on the website, Michigan has a raw most deserving rating, if you will, of 1.014. Florida State's is 1.013. So you're talking about a thousandth of a point here in terms of the difference between Michigan and Florida State. So very, very close there between 2 and 3 with Florida State. Washington slides back 1 to number 4. Alabama back to number 5. Georgia. So again, the committee is likely going to move Georgia number 1. They already had them number 2. I had Georgia number 7. Georgia made up a lot of ground. They were like a distant 7. Now they're a pretty close number 6. They made up a lot of ground, but the committee's going to give them credit for beating a number 9 at the time, whatever Ole Miss ends up being now, the number 9 ranked team. For me, remember, as we're assigning credit here to resumes, Georgia beat the number 15 power rated team. So Ole Miss not power rated as high as they were ranked. And again, I had them number 6 last week in the most deserving. So I actually had Ole Miss ranked higher than the committee did. But that's not how we assign credit when you're building your resume. It doesn't matter what your opponent's ranking is. It matters what their power rating is. And so I talked about that at length. I'll probably keep touching on it as we get closer to Selection Sunday. But Georgia's up to number 6 for me. Texas, despite the win, falls from number 5 to number 7. Oregon up to number 8. So they're moving in the right direction. And then I've got Ole Miss at 9. So they are now number 9. I'm sure the committee will drop them farther than that because they were 9 last week. And then Missouri's my number 10, as you mentioned. Something that stands out to me, Tyler, about this, you've got James Madison number 8, Liberty number 9. I've got those teams number 12 and number 21 respectively. So just, as I at a glance, it looks like you do value being undefeated, which is totally understandable, more than my most deserving model does, having those teams that have played a little bit lesser schedule and not looked as impressive against it ranked a little bit lower. But again, both of those teams, James Madison number 12, they're actually 11 last week, but they fall one spot this week to number 12, and Liberty's up 2 to number 21. Other G5s that I have kind of in the top 30 here, I've got Tulane at number 26. That's my only other G5 that I have in the top 30. But you said, Tyler, like the resume rankings, it's something that you've enjoyed doing. It's something that you're getting going into. It's not like your primary focus or motivation. It really is mine. And I use the power ratings to do them, but I enjoy this more than anything about the power ratings. The two things I like most about my numbers and the applications of them are the most deserving rankings, the resume rankings, and then also like the season projection. So projecting forward, the chances that a team's going to reach a certain threshold or make a conference championship game. I really don't care as much about the individual game projections. Like this week, I've got, team X favored by 3 over team Y. So I know that's what people care about from a betting standpoint. And so I put it out there, and of course, I'm hoping that those things are as close to accurate as possible so that people using them to bet can make some money. But that's really not my primary motivation. I mean, you need the power ratings to do any of those things. So that's why I spend time on it and try to get it right. But yeah, this to me, this is what I love about it. This is what I like talking about. This is what I like debating, because at the end of the day, that's what college football is. It's about informed, educated debates on who's number one. I mean, that's what it boils down to, and I love being a part of that conversation. No swaps for me this week. Again, I've talked about in the past, if two teams are right next to each other in my most deserving rankings and they played on the field, if the team that won that game is one spot behind a team that it beat, I can flip. I'm okay flipping that to honor the head-to-head because no other team's being impacted. As I quickly look through my top 25, at least, I don't think I have any of those head-to-heads that need to be flopped this week. So pretty straightforward, most deserving for me. Again, what's the committee going to do? They'll probably put Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Michigan 3, and I imagine Florida State will stay at 4 with Washington at 5. Like, I don't think they're going to change much about their top, 7 or 8 teams, except for 1 and 2. For me, a week after having almost no changes in the top 10, I've got a bunch. Only Ohio State stayed at number 1. Everybody else in my top 10 reshuffled, with Missouri coming in and Penn State falling out of those spots. Also interesting, my last thing on it, because I know I've been talking for a long time. Louisville, a team I talked about in the power ratings, they won their game. They're now 9-1 in a Power 5 conference. They actually fell 2 spots for me to number 15. And it's not, I mean, you only beat Virginia by 7. So that's not great because, the average top 25 team would be expected to win that game by more than that. So you're taking a hit there. But your overall record achievement does improve because you won that game. So even if there was a 98% chance that the top 25 team wins that game, you've got a 100% chance on the win. So that's going to improve you a little bit there. But LSU, Oklahoma, both jump over Louisville, as did Missouri, but Utah fell behind them. So 3 teams above them, 1 team falls back. It's a net of -2 in the rankings. So I have them number 15. I fully expect them to be a top 10 team for the committee, seeing as they were number 11 last week and 2 teams in front of them lost.
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking of while you were running through that is
Well, I was
I
being
feel like
long-winded.
honestly, I don't I don't have the committee rankings in front of me. I don't know where Oregon was. I think they were 6.
They were.
I think Oregon missed an opportunity this week. I think had they really put it to USC, because they were what, 15 or 16-point favorites. They won by 9. If Oregon had really put it on USC with the way Washington has looked recently and with Florida State going down to the wire with Miami, I think Oregon could have jumped up to number 4. I don't think
Wow.
they're going to now. Like I think Oregon, you know, I don't think they're going to drop, but I think the committee will just maintain status quo with those teams, with Florida State, Washington, and Oregon at 4, 5, 6. I think that's just going to stay the same. But I think Oregon, maybe missed an opportunity there to jump up there. Another point I wanted to make, you mentioned James Madison and Liberty in my rankings, and I was just looking, and this just goes back to what we talked about all season. My ratings generally are higher on the group of 5 teams from a power rating standpoint. So James Madison and Liberty, I mean, they have by far the worst strength of schedules in the top 10. James Madison, an average opponent power rating of -6.2. Liberty, an average opponent power rating of -6.9. Which, like Louisville, you mentioned, they haven't played a great schedule. Their average opponent power rating is -3.3, so a full touchdown better than James Madison and Liberty, but James Madison and Liberty are undefeated. So, like, just to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit as to why those teams are so much higher, my numbers just value, not that they have a great strength of schedule, but just values the group of 5 teams, more so than your ratings do. So I thought that was worth pointing out. So people were like, "Well, why does Kelly have Liberty 21 and they're undefeated, and Tyler's got them number 9?" So that's why. Just because, not that their schedule is great, but their average opponent power rating, which is how I do my strength of schedule, is just higher, just because that's how my ratings are set up. So that's why. But that's really all I had here. I see Texas A&M number 29 for you. Real quick, fired Jimbo Fisher today. They won by like 50 yesterday, and then fired their coach. That's got to be like the first time that's ever happened. But thought that was worth mentioning here as some news that I'm sure everyone's already heard by the time you're hearing this. But worth pointing out. Penn State also fired offensive coordinator Mike Yursich after another. I mean, Michigan controlled the game and credit to them for doing that on the road. if if Penn State had any semblance of an offense, they had opportunities. I felt like in that game to really make Michigan sweat, but they just had nothing offensively. It was kind of a joke. And it was the same story when they played at Ohio State. I mean, they were 0 for 15 on third downs until that final drive against Ohio State. So, Mike Yurcich, I tweeted on Saturday, is Mike Yurcich just offensive Alex Grinch? And then sure enough, now they're both fired. So I said, yes, he is. He must be offensive Alex Grinch. So worth pointing those two firings out here to wrap up this show. Kelly, any final thoughts here? Week 11. Any general college football thoughts before we close?
Yeah, I think I forget who said it. Maybe it's been multiple people, but there's a saying out there that's something like what will be done eventually should be done immediately. Like it's basically saying like if something is going to happen, it needs to happen now. And so if Jimbo Fisher was going to get fired after the season, then I have no problem doing it now. The timing is very, very weird because, like you said, they win by a lot. They're number 14 in my power ratings. They're up this week. They're number 29 in my most deserving rankings. They're up this week. They're the number 2 ranked 4-loss team, right behind Auburn. So not that you're like writing home about that, but you are in my top 30 of the most deserving. And hey, the expectation is higher than number 14 in the power ratings and number 29 in the most deserving. I get that. But it was just the timing did seem strange. Same thing, Penn State, making the move. Like, what's left on your schedule now? I mean, what if you were going to make that move, I don't understand why you wouldn't have done it, prior to a couple big tests. But anyway, yeah, all good on those fronts. It's always I never root for anyone to lose their job. I work in college athletics. I understand how and why it happens, and both those folks will be compensated, and I'm sure we'll land other places in the future. But it'll be interesting to see what those two programs in particular do with those positions moving forward because they are high profile, both those. I mean, head coach at Texas A&M, offensive coordinator at Penn State. Those are big time jobs, and those are opportunities that someone's going to take and hopefully have success with. So we'll see. But yeah, Tyler, I'm excited to see what the committee does on Tuesday night. I know some people, I feel like I take flack for it from some. They're like, why do you pay attention to the committee rankings? They're meaningless. Don't feed into that. Don't they only do this because they get ratings and it takes away from the game. And I don't even like disagree with a lot of those things, but it's like,
but then what do we do? Like if you're not going to care about the then what do we do?
If you love college football and like I'm a regular season guy. I think I made that very, very clear at this point. Like if it was up to me, we would do the regular season. We wouldn't even do conference championships. We would do the regular season and we would have at most a 14 playoff, maybe even back to 2 and just do the BCS national championship game. Like I would minimize the number of postseason games, not bowls, but like postseason playoff games if I could. But the fact is, we have this system. It is in place. Crowning a national champion does matter. And like it or not, where your team is ranked by this group of 13 individuals right now does make a difference. Like if you're a team that's in contention here, you want to know where your team is. And I'm just a fan of the game. So why would I not pay attention? Like I've got 5 TVs, man. I got the rankings on. I got Maction on too. Don't worry. It's not like I'm foregoing Maction so that I can watch the rankings, but it kind of gets under me a little bit because it's like people I respect and like people that I'm friends with that are like, dude, stop watching that. And I'm like, well, okay, but no. So anyway, I'm excited to see what they do. Yeah, I'm excited to see what they do. But we'll see. It'll be interesting. I absolutely love this aspect of it, the most deserving rankings, and we are certainly at that point of the year where it is a major talking point, if not the talking point. So always fun, Tyler. We're gonna have another great week of college football here. Only 2 more weeks in the regular season, man. I know we're gonna break it all down later this week, so it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Yep, we'll be back on Thursday as usual to do our week 12. We've only got 2 full weeks left, like you said. That's crazy. We'll be back to preview week 12. Not a ton of marquee games this week. This is kind of like the SEC FCS Invitational week every year, so not a lot to talk about there. We'll probably get into more G5 games this week if I had to guess. Just taking a quick peek at the slate this week. So we'll get into that. Like I said, we got Memphis SMU. I know for sure we'll talk about that one. But then gearing up for the rivalry week next week, which is always awesome. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to the next 2 weeks. But until next time, for Kelly Ford, I'm Tyler Shoemaker, and that was Calculated Risk.